guys, and welcome to the Legendary Ladies podcast. And it's another duo because we are talking
Double
about the
duos.
Bear. And Amy doesn't watch the Bear, and she actually was willing to watch it, but she's like, "I'll watch the pilot." And we're like, "Oh man, the new season's coming out. We're
in
caught
so
up.
deep now.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to go back to that. Maybe we'll do a pilot pod on it in the future. But I think we want to talk about season
Amy
3.
would hate the pilot because there's so much screaming in the pilot.
I
There's
don't think
so much
she'd like the show.
We watched the pilot. We actually started watching this. I want to say maybe a month and a half ago. It's not a very long show, so it's not hard to catch up. And we watched and everybody had told us that it was really stressful and that you have to kind of get through like half of the first season and then it kind of calms down. But we watched the pilot and I was just like, I'm stressed. Like I'm stressed out. Like the pilot is very chaotic. Everyone's screaming at each other.
The show in general is very chaotic.
Yeah, it's not as bad as like season 1 was particularly chaotic. I think it's mellowed as it's gone along, but yeah, it's not like a show that you're gonna like kick back with and chill out with. It's like not a chill out show.
But it's also short, which is also so strange because I think it's, I guess, kind of considered to be a comedy because it's 30 minutes, and it is, there's funny moments, but it's so stressful you forget it's a comedy. And the thing that makes me like to quote unquote relax to it is that it's not an hour long. But
yes, that's what I like about it too. It's that it is not an hour. I do think it's hilarious that it keeps. I think maybe the real comedy is that it keeps on getting nominated as a comedy and winning as a comedy, even though it's not a comedy. And I think we'll talk about this season, but I feel like maybe season 1 or like season 2 could maybe say, okay, we're a comedy this season. No, you can't
There's a lot of stress. I agree.
Give me,
there's funny moments.
There was funny moments. Like the facts are funny, but, and like the haunting thing was funny, but like that, I mean, come on. This is a half an hour drama. Like, let's all be real.
It's very Orange is the New Black, and honestly, this season in particular reminded me of that because I don't remember if they did it in season 1, but season 2 they had the Forks episode with Richie's character.
Yeah.
So we got to see
such a good episode.
Which I love. It still is my favorite episode probably of the show. And then this episode you had napkins with Tina's character. I was like, oh yeah, this does kind of have a very Orange is the New Black format where you get to like peel back the curtain for their supporting characters. And that's what I want to talk about with this season. And I think it was a positive and negative to this season is that Carmy is not really a main character of this season. He's very to the background and is really a lot about the supporting characters, which there's a part of me that really liked it. I like learning more about Tina. I think that was probably the best episode of the season. And then I like seeing the little drama with Richie and his family, where his family is actually like really good people that just so happen not to work out. It's like, come to my wedding. And the guy that his ex-wife is marrying is like the best person you could ever ask for. Like, wow, that sucks for
Josh
you.
Hartnett for some reason. You're like, Josh? What?
They had a lot of random celebrity guests with John Cena, joining his show.
John Cena's was wild.
But yeah, and Sugar has a really big arc that also I really enjoyed with Jamie Lee Curtis's interaction of her having the baby. But it's a lot of that and not a lot of Carmy dealing with, like, the whole season is him like breaking up with Claire. And you kind of know why. And then maybe I just forgot that happened in season 2, but they don't really reference it very often besides the moment. And that's like his whole arc until the last episode where it's like, okay, I'm ready for the next episode. And it's like, wait, it's the end of the season. Yeah. Like you haven't done anything with him.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like a critique of this season is that it feels like the first half of a season and not like an entire season.
Yeah,
like, it feels like when you get to the season finale, which, like, spoiler alert, it even says to be continued at the end of it, because it's not a ton happens, honestly. I think we're in like within the first month of the restaurant being open. And there are obviously as the season progresses, some open questions about how it's doing and like if it'll be able to continue on. But yeah, it doesn't feel like it was like a full, complete story.
And I think there's a lot of what I like about this show is the theater like aspect of it. I enjoy that it's really about conversations and it's about the characters, but because it's so much about conversations and the characters here, I just feel like the plot really got lost in this season. And because you agree, it's the first month of things opening, you get the tension between Richie and Carmy, and you get some, I mean, the cinematography for the show and the directing is just like kind of blows your mind. Everything feels like a highbrow movie. But you love those moments. But then, yeah, when you think about the overall plot, it's like, wow, that was really well written, but where is this going? And even Io's journey, her character, it's about choosing between this extravagant restaurant and Carm. But they hardly interact this season. There's like maybe one scene with them. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. I think you're really supposed to feel the distance between Carmy and Sydney in this season, where like they're clearly not communicating with each other, or he's not listening to her at all, really. And that's like sort of what puts her in the position that she finds herself in at the end of the season, where she's trying to decide whether or not she's going to, sign that partnership agreement and be a part of the Bear, or if she's going to like jump ship and be the the main chef at a different restaurant. And you can really understand why
the bad review might have come too. Well, kind of bad review. It's like
a
mixed
who knows?
Review.
It seems like it was a mixed review, but also the weird thing about the finale is that you see so many different potential reviews that it's like the idea, I guess, is that Carmy is really in his head and he's imagining every different version of what the review could be. And then when the review hits, you don't really see what the headline is, or you just see like little words out of context. So you don't know was it good? Was it bad? Was it mixed? Or like, is this even real? Like, is he imagining this review? Like, what is the review? And then boom, to be continued. And you're like, but I felt like by the season finale, like finally there were stakes, because his uncle tells him basically, if the review's bad, I'm going to have to cut and run, essentially. Like, I'm not going to be able to bankroll the restaurant anymore. And then there's that scene with the uncle, which makes sense. And then there's a scene with the uncle and the guy that they call the computer, which is like his finance guy, who's like, did you tell him you're running out of money? Like the uncle is kind of going broke. So then I think to me, it was a bigger question of, did he say that thing about the review to kind of cover his ass, almost to be like, well, no, we shut him down because of the review, but actually it's because he has no money. Like, if the review is stellar, will he still end up having to pull his financial backing because he's going broke? So there are a lot of suddenly there were a lot of big questions, existential questions about the characters and the business. And then it's just as that stuff is happening with actual stakes, that's when the season ends. And I was like, wait, no.
And that's what this show does a lot. And I always forget until I when I watch it. And the first episode is great. It's it's a well done edited episode, but it's not saying anything new with that first episode. And I remembered, oh yeah, this show never says anything too big until episode 4, because it's that slow burn. Yeah, which I don't mind. It's just season 2 and season 1 did a little bit better. And going back to Sydney,
I would say in season 2 it did it a little bit better, because we at least knew what they were working towards. The whole season had a timeline. It was they have this amount of time to open this restaurant, and if they don't hit this opening date, then they're screwed. And even though there were episodes, the episode where Marcus stages in was it Amsterdam or something like that, right, and learns how to make breads and stuff like that, you knew the whole time that okay, but we're still moving towards this end goal, and all of this is kind of working towards the end goal. Even the really good Richie episode, Forks, was well, he's learning how to do the front of house stuff, because when they open, he needs to know how to do that. So even if it was seemed a little bit slower or more character driven, you could at least tie it back to the end goal. I feel that kind of got lost a little bit in this season, where they were doing a lot of similar things as in season 2, but the end goal was a lot murkier. I think if we had gotten that conversation with the uncle a lot earlier in the season, then maybe there would have been some like propulsion or momentum to be like, oh, if they don't do X, Y, and Z by this time, then they're screwed.
Well, think about Tina's episode too. You kind of bring up a good point. Is just like, that was a great episode. I loved it, but
Mm.
also like Tina's hardly shown after that. It's like after an episode like that, you would think she'd have a stronger presence in the present episodes.
Yeah, you would. You would. I loved that Tina episode, but I guess I could argue that like in the previous season, the episode was taking place in like the present. So like we were seeing Marcus learn things, or we were seeing Richie learn things. The Tina episode, as great as it was and as much as I liked it, took place in the past. So we were seeing like how Tina became started working at the sandwich shop, the beef. And I thought it was really, that scene between her and Mikey was such a good scene. But yeah, we learned more about her, but it wasn't moving any particular part of the story forward. And it was also a flashback. So it was like in the past.
Yeah, no, that's something that definitely confused me too. And going to Sydney and Carm's relationship, I think something that's interesting is the thing that I actually think does build up towards the end is that Carmy is not the best boss because he has this like PTSD because of his Joel McHale boss. And you get that confrontation, but then you kind of learn that Carmy's doing the same thing to Sydney. Like the same panic attacks he had, she's having now. And you're like, oh damn, like that's interesting to see. And it'll be interesting to see how she deals with it. And there's also this like kind of looming, I feel like something bad's gonna happen because there's the funeral of this restaurant. But every single moment, I'm like, is Sydney's dad gonna die? Is like when the baby was gonna be born? Like, is the baby gonna die? Like, I don't know why I had this like haunting feeling that something bad was gonna happen.
Yeah, it does feel like there's always sort of like a storm cloud over everything on this show. Nothing is just straightforward, really happy. And because I binged it, I had just finished, we had literally just finished season 2, or we finished season 2 just as season 3 was like coming out. So we got to go right from season 2 into season 3. And the end of season 2 is when they do the soft opening, like the friends and family opening. And it goes really well, kind of, but also it doesn't go really well because Carmy gets trapped in the walk-in freezer and then can't do any of the service. And then it kind of gets crazy. And then all that stuff happens with Claire. So it's like, even when good things happen on the bear, there's like usually something bad that comes along with it that also happens. So like, you're always kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop on this show. It's like, well, it's happy now, but for how long?
And I think what's interesting too is that there's this interesting balance this season of actually seeing food. Because it's like
Yes.
you do see the service a lot, but I also find it interesting that I don't know if we saw it enough. Like I wanted more food talk, but then I think this season in particular was a lot about like the industry of food, and that's what I actually really appreciated. Like there's this, I think it's in episode 2, this 4-minute long montage of just seeing service workers like in Chicago, which I can only guess is actually real service workers in Chicago, which I actually loved. I thought it was like this like really interesting, almost short film that we were watching. But that's pretty much the theme of this whole entire season is don't forget the service worker, the person that you don't really remember, like they're working really hard. And I feel like that became more of a forefront of this season than the food, which again, I don't mind. I just think it's interesting that it used to be about like this crazy plate that they're trying to build, but it was more about like, no, let's talk about service workers as a whole, especially during COVID, because that was like a big part of the season too. Especially,
Yeah.
I love Olivia Colman's character where she's just so kind, but then also like so I don't know, she says this like really interesting vibe to her. And I like this whole storyline of her also closing her restaurant, not due to COVID, but also feels like it's due to COVID. But she's just like, oh, I just want to enjoy my life. And I feel like the reason Forks was so good, obviously, is Richie, but it's also her character. Like, I'm glad they brought her back, and she is such a through line, because I think she does bring a very interesting voice, because you just see this like manic side of the restaurant business, but you can see that she's very like clean cut, every second counts type person, but she still brings like a good air to the restaurant. And that's something that you see in the end of this this episode 2 or the finale, where Sydney's sitting around with all these chefs and they all have these good stories that seem stressful but end up being good. And she's like, there's good results to this.
You don't feel terrible all the time. I actually just today read like a really interesting story on Eater that was about like how the bear is kind of, you know, tackling the sort of toxicity in the restaurant industry and like restaurant culture, and then kind of questioning the idea of like, can it really do that? If it has all these special guest stars of these like really high esteemed chefs who have been in the past accused of doing that same kind of behavior. So you're showing these people who run these really high establishments, who, you know, in the past you've heard, oh, it's not good to work there, it's not good to work there, like the you know, that place is toxic. And then they were showing them on the bear as if like, okay, well, this is the good side of the restaurant industry. And it's like, well, do they really want to tackle how toxic the restaurant industry is if they're, you know, if they're having these special guest stars that they're kind of like, you know, gassing up as like, oh, these guys are great though. And I thought that was really interesting because, you know, you do kind of see, they do really talk about the toxic side of the restaurant industry. And like you mentioned, the idea that a lot of these people, it's kind of like family trauma. Like it's like the generational trauma that they pass on. So like somebody works at a terrible restaurant with like a bad mentor who's really mean to them. And then when they open a restaurant, they start doing the same things to the people who are coming up under them, who then go open a restaurant, who do the same things to the people coming up under them. And so we see like Carmy was really affected by Joel McHale's, you know, kind of dick chef that he worked under. But then he's doing the same thing to Sydney, and he doesn't mean to, but he's doing it anyway. And she's also having panic attacks and freaking out. So it was like, I thought that the Eater article was interesting, where it's like, you know, how seriously does the show want to take, you know, diving into this idea? Because if they did, it feels like some of these guest appearances at the end of the season where they have all these famous chefs are like maybe not making the point that they want to be making. And I thought that was interesting.
And speaking on that same note, you see that in the restaurant business, but you also see that within Carmy's family with Jamie Lee Curtis's character, but not as much Carmy dealing with that, but his sister, which again, I think that was one of my favorite episodes of the season, was seeing her wanting her husband next to her. Cause again, like her husband seems like the sweetest guy in the world.
Poor Pete.
And then having, right. Poor Pete. He's just trying to live his life.
He just doesn't know what's happening.
No, he's so stupid, but he seems very nice.
I love it. Whenever he pops up, I'm just always so excited to see him because everybody's always so mean to him too. And
he doesn't even know people are being mean to him.
He doesn't even pick it up.
No, and that's why I think he works so well in this show, because he's just like kind of rolls over with it. But that's so interesting about Jamie Lee Curtis's character in general, is that this like passive aggressiveness that Sugar knows exists, but she's also like, you made me who I am. Like, I am a people pleaser to an extent that it kills me. Because she almost does the opposite of what Carmy does. Carmy is like the exact replica of the people that have abused him. She's the opposite. She's like, well, I never had anything given to me. I've always had to help my mom, so I'm going to do that for everybody else. And you see that throughout the show. She's running Carmy's restaurant because she wants to help her brother. And she does the same thing with her mom, even though she like realizes that her mom is not a good person and she's trying to like break the cycle, but it seems like she never can, because now she's kind of warmed herself into their life again. Like, I'm sure we're going to see her again. Yeah, she's back.
She's back, man. Yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis is so good in this role, like so good. I like that episode, the one where Sugar's giving birth. Like, yeah. I thought that was such a good episode. I thought it was a little too long. Like, I thought it could have been a little shorter, but it was
not as many ice cubes. Maybe we could have
a couple less ice chips. But yeah, I thought it was so good, and like she's so good in the role, and but that character is so toxic.
But she's so real, I think. I think that's what I really like about her character, is like those people exist, and the way television represents them usually is either like mustache twirling villain, or like, oh my God, look, you should respect your mother. She's the best person in the world. She just needs help and she's done everything for you. And I think this version of this character does a good job, like, of seeing she's a human being. Like, you could see that she, like, you see why she does the things she does, but it doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah, yeah. And she, you can see her, especially in that episode, trying with her daughter, even though
But she
obviously
wants a relationship with her.
yeah, you can see her, make some very that character mistakes with the trying, being like, weird and too much, but she is trying and like not, and she's also, it seems like she's also trying to at least understand Sugar's like criticism of her, where she like,
Yeah.
her daughter is like very, I thought it was like a good push forward from what we saw in season 2 in that flashback episode to Christmas, which was like a traumatizing watch,
Sure.
to see how Sugar was like, this is what it was like for me growing up, and I was always scared, and this is why, and like, it was tough, growing up with you, and knowing that character is probably usually not very receptive to criticism like that. And I thought it was, it kind of did show growth on Dee Dee's part, that like she just kind of, listened to it, even though maybe she didn't like it, and seemed to kind of accept it a little bit. Even though, she's not, nowhere near, cured or like, a much better person, but maybe she's a little like trying to work on it a little bit.
I think that was the big difference here, because you could tell there was a conversation there. And again, it might backfire next season, but I think this is not the last time we've seen Jamie Lee Curtis's character. I think we're going to see a lot more of her. And I hope it's just as nuanced as this, because that's what I enjoy about the Bears so much. It's like when they are screaming at each other, it's the reason why the screaming works so well is because it's something you would see in real life. If you are angry at someone, or even if you are just a loud family or a loud environment, that's how people talk to each other sometimes, where you're over talking to each other. You're like, you just try to get thoughts across. And it's so interesting that this show is also filmed so quickly. I think they film it in like a month. So it's like, and again, it goes back to this like theater aspect. It also seems like a pretty cheap show in that regard, because it's just very quick. It's very much just characters in a room talking to each other, which is what I appreciate.
That's true. I think I read somewhere that they actually filmed this season and next season at the same time, like back to back consecutively.
Wow, that's good.
So hopefully that means that like the next season comes out,
even January. I would hope it's quicker, because it's just like, again, they ended in such a way that it felt like half a season.
Yeah, it just felt like a little unfinished. But yeah, it doesn't seem like it's a very expensive show to make, and it does seem like they can kind of blow through it quickly, which I was like, when we got to the end, Mike was like, oh, we're going to have to wait so long, because you know how every TV show is now like 2 years between seasons. And I was like, no, not this one. This one has been putting out a season of television every year so far. And how insane is it, by the way, that is like it seems like such a shocking thing, like nowadays, that like,
for 10 episodes,
we might get another 10 episodes next year. Can you imagine? It's like, no, that used to be how TV worked. Like, you would just get another season every year, but now it's like, what a sweet little treat to be able to get a season a year.
I know. And what's interesting about this show in particular is that it's the creator directs and writes every episode, besides the Io episode, which was the Tina centric episode. And also I was always curious why there's so many community people in here. So Britta,
who else from
Joel
Community?
Joel McHale,
and
Britta are both in it. I was like, why are they both in the show? And he's married to I forget, Gillian Anderson, I think is her name. They're married. Jacobs, thank you.
No way.
They're married in real life, and that's why Joel McHale is in the show.
That's so cute. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I did wonder. I was like, oh, Gillian Jacobs. I haven't seen her in a while. I love her.
I know, and she's great in this role. And we kind of skimmed over Richie's stuff, but Richie's has a really interesting arc, because it is mostly about his family stuff, and obviously like him trying to run the front of the house, even though the back of the house is crazy. And he's actually doing a pretty good job. Like, he's actually doing his job correctly. He's just like, wow, you should maybe not make all these foods different every night. That's a little
Oh
weird.
my God, yes.
But the family stuff is really interesting because, again, I think the easy way out to go is that his wife's a bitch and she's evil, and they, oh, she doesn't want her to see her kid, and she literally is just like, no, I'm kind of just like, when the kid says, oh, daddy's lonely, she's not coming from a place of like, daddy's lonely, he sucks. It's just like, I want you to be okay. Like
Yeah.
you're my best friend. Like it was such a really interesting scene where she's like, I'm not romantically involved with you, but you're still my family. Like you're all I have when it comes to
Yeah.
like an extended family. I'm like, oh, that's such a weird and not weird, but it's such a different way to look at that. And honestly, I think it's like a better way to look at a relationship like that, because I think that is a more organic place to be if you're co-parenting. I think that's, I'm not saying
Yeah.
all people are like that, but you kind of have to learn to like each other. In this circumstance, it's like you are not a good partner, but that doesn't mean you're not a good dad and not a good friend.
Yeah, and it made me really want to know more about their relationship and their history, and like makes me want to get like a Richie and Tiff flashback episode or something, because in season 2 in Fishes, the episode where the Christmas
Mhm.
episode where everything is terrible, um you see them before they break up when she's
Mhm.
pretty heavily pregnant.
And he's not
um
really caring enough in that
He
circumstance.
yeah, but they talk about, like, trying to be different than their families. We know
Mhm.
that Richie doesn't seem to talk to his family very much,
Or
like,
really have
he's yeah,
family.
like, Carmy's his cousin, but they're not related in any way, and you it takes, like, halfway through season 1 to figure that out. You're like, "Wait, what? They're not related? That's
I
not his
know.
actual cousin? Are you kidding?"
And also
Um
at this point, they act more like brothers than
They
cousins.
really do. And they make some comments, he and Tiff, about like kind of not getting along with their families. And so it makes me wonder more about like Richie's backstory and like what was it like for him growing up, and what is his family like, because we've only gotten like little hints that it wasn't good, and that's why he
Mhm.
spent so much time with Michael and Carmy and Nat. Although again, their family also not great. How bad is Richie's family that like Carmy's family seems more functional? Like that's dark.
No, for sure. And that's something I hope that the show explores. And that's also a question about the show is like a lot of times these streaming shows and these, again, higher brow shows don't want to last 10 seasons. They want to be 5 and out pretty much. And I'm
Mhm.
like, wow, this show has a lot more story to tell. I don't know if this is going to be a 5 season show. I feel like it has to be a lot longer.
Yeah, I feel like it could go on for like a lot longer, because of also the time frame of the story in the show is
Mhm.
pretty truncated. Like season 2 is like 3 months, I think.
That's
Uh
crazy.
I think this season was like 1 month, because when the season opens, it's right after they do the like the soft opening, like the friends and family dinner at the end of season 2. And then like by the end of the season, spoiler alert, like Sydney still hasn't signed the partnership agreement. So you can't imagine that that could have gone on for months and months and months. We're probably talking like a
3 weeks.
month, a month and a yeah, a month maybe maximum has passed in season 3. So over the course of like, these 3 seasons, maybe like a year and a half have passed. So it does feel like this show could potentially go on forever if like every season is like a month in the lives of these people.
Yeah, they're gonna get a lot older if that's true. But
Yes, it's gonna be like, "Oh, Richie, you're looking rough. You're looking
you're
rough this
looking
month."
looking a little rough 5 years later. But
Exactly.
I think another thing we didn't really talk about is Claire as a character. People though do not like her very much, and I don't hate her, but I also do. I'm curious why she's there. I think that's the point. The reason why people are like, oh, I hate when Claire is on the screen. I don't think she's a bad character. I actually think she has some interesting moments. I like when she's talking to the what's
Oh, the
the one with
facts.
yeah. I love that. I like when she's talking to them, and I don't hate her. I think she's fine. It's more the idea of like, when did Carmy start loving her? Because it didn't really seem like he did love her, and I mean that's the whole point of why they grew up. I broke up, And then also the idea of like she just doesn't fit in this show. She just seems so not connected to it all. So I just feel like they put a lot of focus on her, but she's so oddly connected. And I think the reason they're doing it is because they obviously don't want Sydney and Carmy to be together, which I don't think anyone really does. But also then at
Oh,
that point,
people definitely do.
that's true. Though I should talk on television that there's too much shipping. But I think in from what I could read, there's some people and me that I wouldn't want to see them get together. I think it would show a different type of relationship for them. But then at that point, I'm like, just don't give him a romance if that's not where the story is taking you.
Yeah, it feels like they wanted to do something. I think what they wanted to do with her, with the idea of her character, was like Carmy is so laser focused on this thing, at to the point where he has no life outside of it.
Sure.
And so him having like this relationship or like this girlfriend would be like a life that he has outside of the restaurant that would like show like kind of be healthy and functional, and whether or not he can maintain that or not was kind of, I think, supposed to be like the drama of it. But what they don't realize is it's really hard to have like a workplace, essentially like a workplace show, and then have one person who isn't in the workplace, who doesn't really do the workplace, and who just kind of comes in occasionally. Yeah, that usually doesn't endear that character to people. And I agree. I don't have like a huge problem with Claire, but I don't think that they know how to like incorporate her into the show.
Which is weird because
like,
she could just be friends with them, and she kind of is friends with them because she
yeah,
doesn't
like
need to work there to relate to the workplace.
yeah, like the facts would just like come in a lot, and
Wow.
like repair things, but like she could just come in and talk to people and then leave. Like she doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be like, oh, why is Claire here? I also
Yeah.
do feel like a part of like people not liking that character might be that like Io's character doesn't really love that relationship, or Sydney doesn't like that relationship, because when she really wants Carmy to be helping out with the restaurant, he's like off hanging out with Claire. And now in this season, that was sort of like last season. Now in this season, like he's upset that he broke up with Claire, and he's just like doubling down into, no, well, now I'm going to be the best at this restaurant. And she's like, oh, so like in a way that's going to be helpful and collaborative. And he's like, no, in a way that where I'm a dick. And she's like,
Yeah.
great, like it's like, I think you kind of I think because the Sydney character is so beloved, I think for good reason,
Yeah.
I think maybe the audience just kind of reacts to Claire the way like Sydney reacts to Claire, which is like, whenever this girl shows up, nothing good ever happens for me personally.
Yeah, it's like nothing. And it's true because she shows up and then breaks up with him, and then he's just, yeah, he's not being a good friend or a good partner or in a business partner, because it's so, yeah, this season in particular, it's really interesting to see their dynamic because, like you said, there's like a lot of underlining tension between them, so you don't get to see them talk. And like the one scene you really do get to see them talk where Sydney's like, hey, this is the dish I want to do. And he's like, no. And she's like, okay, I thought I had some good ideas. And then her trying to figure out her life too. She had an interesting enough journey here, but I also feel like it was a little slow. So it's hard to talk about it because it also feels so half baked.
Yeah, I agree. I think the idea that he has early in the season when he's like spiraling, which is to do a different menu every day, is psychotic. And everybody tells him that that's crazy, and he doesn't listen. And even when the money guy comes in and says like,
Mm.
no, you can't just do a different menu every day, that's crazy. Like,
Even if you do it once a week, that's a little different than every day.
yes, every day is so crazy. And he doesn't listen. And in the finale, when like Sydney is, I think it was the finale or maybe the episode before, when Sydney's trying to figure out what she's going to do, she's like, she keeps suggesting like, I was thinking we could do this, this and this. And he's like, no. Or he will like agree with her, but be like, I was thinking we would do scallops. Like if she said this thing, he would say a different protein. If she said this thing, he would say a different side. So she's like, great, good talk. Like she realizes that she like doesn't feel like she's contributing in any way because he's not letting her contribute.
Yeah, and then it's interesting because he feels like the only voice in the kitchen too, because it goes back to like Marcus. Honestly, talk about Marcus for a second. He had a lot happen to him, and he's so painted in the background. His mom dies,
Oh,
and they're like,
yeah.
"How's your mom?" You know, it's like, "Yeah, she's still dead." Oh,
Still
sorry,
dead,
Marcus.
yeah.
And like the only great scene, and it's not even his scene, is when Sugar talks to the money guy and says, "Oh, do we really need a pastry chef?" And she's like, "Fuck you." Yes, we do.
Yeah.
You know?
We need
And like that's
Marcus.
great. We need Marcus. And I like, obviously the found family situation of the show, but like he doesn't do anything this season.
Yeah, Marcus had a very lean. I was even trying to think of like what, besides like the funeral for his mom and stuff like that. And like I think he has a nice conversation with Sydney where she's like, welcome to the dead mom club. But besides that, I don't feel like I don't really feel like Marcus compared to last season when he had that great
Right.
episode about like staging at like I can't remember where he was, like Noma or something, and like learning all this cool stuff and like going to all the different restaurants. I feel like, yeah, like trying to compare his journey last season or even season 1 where he like, really realized that he wanted to do like more complicated, baking stuff and like, got really inspired by Carmy. Like in this season, he's just really in the background. He's not doing a whole lot. He's just kind of like there.
Yeah, and it's a shame because I think, they have such cool supporting characters, and you go back to Tina and she's just kind of there too. And then there's I forget the baseball guy's name, but like he has like one scene and the one who like does the
Oh
wine.
yeah. Yeah,
Like I was like, oh, that's interesting. I was like that
yes,
one scene and then it goes nowhere.
I had completely forgotten that he used to play baseball until that one scene, and I was like, "Oh, that's right." To be fair, that poor guy doesn't get a lot of development, like overall. I don't think compared to the other characters, and like where's his episode?
Maybe next season.
Maybe
I'm
next
call me
season.
back.
Yeah, right. But also what I guess the guy, what's his name? Ibrahim, I think, or Abraham, the guy who they sent last season to culinary school with Tina, but he like kind of couldn't make it.
And he actually at least had a little bit of an arc because he's running the beef section.
Yeah, he's running like the takeout window for the sandwiches.
I mean, it's not a lot because he doesn't really say much, but at least he like has a plot.
He has like a little storyline, which is that he's running the sandwich window and he's overwhelmed because he's the only one doing it. And then like halfway, and then as the season wraps up, they hire him like 2 additional people to help. And like that's his whole season, his storyline.
Isn't it crazy that they're trying to, what is interesting is here, like the financials of a restaurant, but it's like Carmy is doing such a bad job. They could have that much business in this beef. They have 2 businesses being run at the same time. Still doing that badly.
Yes. No, that is one of the things I think is really interesting about this show is talking about the restaurant industry and how hard it is to be successful in the restaurant industry. Not just like at the highest levels where you're like a fancy chef, but also just like the fact that restaurants are often operating on razor thin margins where it's like, I think in this season and last season, they had like a real runner of like the characters walking by restaurants that they used to like that were closed or closing. And we have in this season, like Olivia Colman's restaurant is closing. Now it seemed like she just was tired of being in the game and wanted to like relax.
But I think those characters from Forks, like those 3 characters, they're definitely going to be joining the Bear next season.
I think so too.
I think that, or at least I think that girl is going to join the Bear, and I think Richie's going to have a story with her.
Yes, I was going to say, I ship it.
Me too. I like her.
I like her. Even in the Forks episode, we were watching and Mike was like, I think that girl just gave Richie a look. He should date her. And then in the finale,
she's fun. She has like a type A personality, but also seems fun at the same time.
And like I think those characters work because they're like in the industry, and so they really work within like the world of the show. But her especially, I think that they really should find some way to like bring her into the bear and like have her and Richie interact, because I do really like the interaction between those two characters. And honestly, I had a hard time with Richie before that Forks episode,
Me too.
where
Yeah.
I thought he was like, I really like the actor. I think he does a great job, but the character was like by far one of the most annoying parts of the show. I was like, I know that Richie's like an asshole, but like sometimes it's a little much. And
Right.
then I've never seen his character go through such a glow up as in that one episode, where like after that episode, Richie was great.
He's better than Carmy, that's for sure. But
He's
no,
better
and,
than
and
Carmy
going
this season for
going back to
sure.
that character, I think that's what's fun about her is that she could be a really cool foil to him. And I think what's also interesting is that Claire was so introduced as a love interest. Like she's just there to be a love interest. Like that character was introduced for different reasons that they just had chemistry. So like that romance could work out. But I think I don't know. I just have a feeling that she will have a bigger part because why did you introduce them again? And like, why did you make Olivia Colman's restaurants such a big deal? But I know that has to do with Sydney's arc too, because that guy works there. So
Yeah.
I just think those characters are going to be a lot bigger. I think all of them are.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if all of them end up in next season of The Bear too, like in various places, because I think the other thing that you got out of this season was how small of a world the culinary world is, like especially when you're operating at that level, where everybody just kind of knows everybody else. You saw at the funeral dinner, all of these like really, really famous chefs were there because they all know each other. They all kind of operate in the same worlds. They all poach from each other. They all hire the same people. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see them end up in like another really fancy Chicago restaurant, or maybe even at the Bear, like one or two of them might.
Well, we also have that guy who I forget his name, but the one who is trying to poach Sydney. So I think that's going to be a big part of seeing what restaurant he's building. But then also, I also liked him a lot because I thought he was a really interesting character because everyone's a nice guy somehow in the show, but unless they're really, really a true villain. Like they always do something and be like, oh, they actually did the right thing, even though maybe they'll do something wrong later. But like he's like they're painting him as this nice guy, where it's just like, oh, I don't want to poach you. I literally want to axe Carmy. It's Sydney who's like, I don't want to talk to him.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. He's not trying to like poach her from underneath Carmy. He's just like, hey, I really like the way that you do things, and like I would love to have you if you're interested. Where it's not like a backstabbing thing,
Right.
which I think is very funny. It's like they're not doing drama really.
Right.
It
could be in another show.
Yeah, the drama is that like so many of our characters are just like emotionally stunted people who cannot have a conversation with each other.
That's a big part of this show, this season,
Especially
honestly.
Sydney. Yeah, Sydney and Carmy this season, like
And
yeah,
Richie too.
And yeah, that's true. And Richie too. You just can't. Nobody can kind of have a conversation this season, especially Carmy. Like, there's a whole episode where they're like, "What if you just apologized? Like, what if you just apologized?" And he's like, I can't do it. He can't just say, I'm sorry."
But that's the whole point of this show is like, conversation can heal, because that's the whole point of Carmy's relationship with his brother. That was the whole, it's like him always like kind of replaying these moments in his head of like, this is what my brother wanted, and not knowing what his brother wanted because they didn't talk to each other. They're like, I love my brother, but I was busy doing my own thing. And it's very interesting that, the whole show is how people do not know how to communicate with each other, even though television is kind of built on communication.
Yeah, and especially in that family, I feel like the only person who's even approached learning some healthy communication skills is like Natalie.
But even her, she's an anxious mess all the time.
And she's so anxious all the time. But Carmy and Mikey couldn't for their life, like the life of them, like communicate to each other,
like the Christmas episode there. And also, I mean, that was all because he committed suicide, right? It wasn't,
you did. Yeah.
I mean, that was the whole point too. And you get a little bit of that in this season again, where he's talking to Tina, where he's just like, I'm miserable, but he says it in such a way where it's, yeah, but that's life. It's just like, I'm happy, but I'm miserable. And it's just like, if like his brother heard that, maybe he could have gotten the point of like, oh, maybe maybe he's more miserable than happy. And I think that's so interesting. And that's the whole point of like, oh, if someone talked to him, would have things been different, which you don't know. That's like this kind of whole root of this television show. And I mean, obviously I think it's going to stay that way probably forever. It's like the theme of the show. But I think that is what's so magical about how this show works, and how the reason why I love The Bear is it doesn't feel like any other show. And that's not because of like it's about food or it's about assholes, because we have a lot of shows that are about food and assholes. But there's something about the dialogue work. And I heard someone compare it to like Gilmore Girls, where it's like, is there any other writer who's been able to fit as many words on a script as Gilmore Girls? It's like probably The Bear, because it's like very fast.
And they're all yelling at each other in the kitchen, overlapping dialogue.
And it's very like story driven. It's very much like, pull that one time. Let me tell you this story about this one time I was in a building and I saw a building and there's this bird. And somehow it works, because I think other shows that could be so boring. It's like, don't explain things to me. I want to see it. But they do it in such a way where it's like, yeah, that was an interesting story about the building and the bird. Like I think Olivia Colman, she was saying something like when they were outside, she was talking about like some moments she had. And I was just like, wow, only this show could do these like kind of beautiful monologues about nothing, that actually becomes something.
Yeah, I mean, I liked in that Forks episode, which was season 2, but she has that moment with Richie where she talks about how she didn't really know her father that well, and then once he passed away, she was like looking at his journals, and that he ended every entry the same way, and then she like walks off, and he realizes she never told him what he ended the entries with, and then looks up and sees that every second counts. And realizes that's what it was. And then obviously you see that pull through into this season, where that motto is now in the kitchen at Carmy's restaurant. So yeah, like these stories like kind of continue on from season to season too, and some of them are actually kind of important to the characters.
Yeah, and they always like kind of suck you in, because what I also like about this show is that there's this story just about people. It's a very like introverted show in some ways, where Tina is a great example, where that whole episode is really just her not wanting to be home and wanting a job and wanting find a purpose. That was a really interesting story between Mikey and Tina, where they're trying to talk. This is a show about people who know what they want to do. It's a show about someone with so much passion that there's no other room for anything else. And to hear their point of views of like, I don't have a passion. I'm kind of okay at things, but I'm not great at anything. What does that mean for my destiny? What does this mean for my life? And those are the type of stories I really enjoy about The Bear, where you could dissect things that I feel like not a lot of people vocalize, but I'm sure a lot of people feel in life.
Yeah, it's really true.
So, but yeah, no, I think this season, it's hard, because I think the overall question, is it the best season of The Bear? No, I think season 2 is still better. And honestly, even season 1, but I think the show grows really well. Like, I think this is still a good installment of the show. Even it doesn't have to be the best season to be an enjoyable season. Like, it is a show that weirdly enough, I could just go to sleep and be like, oh, I'm going to watch like 4 episodes, because it's so, anxiety inducing, but there's something about it that makes you feel like you're with your friends and you're just hearing them yell, and you're like, yeah, I'm used to them yelling, but I'm part of the gang gonna listen to them yell.
Everyone's screaming here. It's like family.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think season 2 was such good TV. I think
multiple episodes.
Yeah, anything, honestly, I think this season was going to be an uphill climb to be better than last season. So I guess in hindsight, I shouldn't have been surprised that it wasn't as good as season 2. Yeah, I don't think this was the Bears' best season. I thought it was like a little too slow with the storytelling, but I really enjoyed it. I think straight through, I had a good time watching it. I do really like the rhythms of the show. Like it does have a certain lyrical quality to it, where you can just kind of put it on and really just kind of enjoy the way that they tell their stories. Like the first episode of the season is mostly just kind of like a walk through Carmy's life. Like it's
Right.
just like, Carmy, this is your life. And it's like just flashbacks to him staging different places, and like a little bit in the present day, and then flashbacks again. And like the narrative is really non-linear, and it's just kind of there's not a lot of dialogue, it's a lot of vibes, and I was like, you know what, I'm chill with this is fine. Like I
Yeah.
don't know. At a different show, I think I would have been really annoyed by that. On this show, I was like, yeah, it's cool. It's
You're
cool.
almost like relaxing with it.
Yeah.
No, and it's true. And I saw there was like a tweet from somebody saying that, they miss 22 show episodes because you get those weird episodes where like Buffy, the body or the
Yes.
musical episode. But I think The Bear kind of does that in stride, even though it's a streaming episode. They don't really give a shit. They're just like, I want to tell an episode. Well, their 5 minutes are just people waving. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do that artsy thing. And I think, again, that's what's so interesting about this show is just you could tell it comes from, again, I keep talking about a theater background, but also comes a lot from a movie background. It's like this very interesting mix of theater, movie, television. The reason I say theater is because of the way they cut things. Like there's so many one takes. There's so many things you could tell that they did that one take and then we're moving on to the next thing. It's like very rough in that way, but I like it. And then just the cinematography very much feels more like a film than it does a television show, which I find very interesting.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, there's something, yeah, like kind of cinematic about the show, especially like when they have these like long shots of them,
Mhm.
cooking or like plating something. You're like, oh, it's beautiful.
Right.
They do such a good job. We talked about this is probably not the most expensive show to make, but they spend their money well, unlike Carmy.
Oh,
They
who
are
does not?
they're using their money in a very good way because it looks rich. Like the show looks like
Mhm.
it's very cinematic, it's very beautifully shot and like
And
edited
there's like
together.
3 places they go to. They go to the Bear, they go
True.
to they sometimes go to that other restaurant. I mean, there's not much that they have to kind of do
They're not
to
doing
do
they're
this
not
show.
doing a lot of like they're not doing a lot of like external
Yeah.
shots. They're not having to scout a lot of locations. It's like mostly just in the restaurant. Respect. But yeah, no, I think
Has a Always Sunny in Philadelphia feel to it in that regard, where
yes,
it's just like
oh,
one place
Daddy's
that they
Pub.
go to. Yeah, and again, that makes it really cheap for them because it's just like
But you
they
know
and
what?
also these
Where they
actors are a
spend
lot more popular too, that they
That's
could just
true.
do a month and then they could go on to the next thing.
And they probably love that too. It's like if they're able to shoot really fast, they can do this cool prestige TV show that everybody loves and then go off and do a bunch of movies. Like it's
Mhm.
not really impacting their career in any way. Like they can
I mean, look at
continue
Io.
doing. Yeah, she's blowing up, and I
She's
feel
done
like
like
they're
3 movies. She did Bottom, she did Inside Out, and I guess SNL. I was trying to think if there was something else.
I feel like
Those are the
she's
3 I could
everywhere
think
right
of.
now, but that's probably
Mhm.
because I love her. I feel like she's the
Me
internet's
too.
darling right now.
She is.
Um,
Ireland
and
loves her. I don't
Ireland,
know if you know that joke.
we stand an Irish queen. Uh,
I remember when I
but
first learned about that, I'm like, why are people talking about Io and Ireland? Why are people saying she's Irish? And then I looked it up and just like, for some reason, I think she said something on the internet, and then
I think
Ireland's like, she is ours. And she's like,
I
I
think
love
she made
Ireland.
she made some joke about being Irish, and then Ireland was like, "Yes, yes,
You
you are."
are.
And so now everybody just believes it. I like that it's like an ongoing. It was like one of those things where it was mentioned, and I went, "What? How is she's Irish? I thought she was American." I like had to look it up, and then I was like, "What? I'm an idiot."
I love how sarcastic she is, and that I feel like she's the only person who could say I'm from Ireland, and she just
And
can go with it.
I like how she like name dropped. She was saying some. I saw some clip of her saying something, and she was like to all of my favorite places in Ireland, to Dublin, to like Killarney. Like she was just like calling out Irish places. She's like my homeland. I was like, I love her. She's so good.
She has such
But
dry humor, which I really like.
she
She's
really
just
does.
very dry.
And also her letterboxed account is amazing.
Love her
Which
letterbox.
it was funny because just the other night we watched the first Mad Max movie because Mike had never seen it. Well, not the first one. We watched Fury Road.
Yeah, the one that is the first modern
Mad Max movie. And I went onto Letterboxd to like log it into my little thing. And I like to, like, when I'm doing that, I like to see what like a couple of reviews said before I do it.
That's the best part of Letterboxd. You got to see what people say. That's funny.
The reviews are always so funny. And then I was like, oh, this review at the top is really, really funny because it was all about like having lost the reviewer was like, I lost my virginity to the guy who was the
guitar guy,
the flaming guitar guy. Yeah. And then I clicked it open, and of course, this is Io's review. Like, of course, it's so funny. Why wouldn't it have been her review? So I just love her.
I also find it fascinating that she has such a big Letterboxd appearance. Like she has a presence on Letterboxd, even though she's like a movie star. She's just like this. Also feels like this average Joe on Letterboxd.
I know, it's the best. It's the best. She's just like leaving.
Her dad's on Letterboxd too, and she's like, "You got to follow my dad." Yeah, you got to follow her dad's account.
That's amazing. I'm gonna follow all of them. I'm far down the IO rabbit hole.
No, I love her. And I love Bottoms, so I remember that was where I obviously liked the Bear too. But Bottoms was like, because the Bear, she's like funny, but she can't be that funny. Like it is more character driven.
Yeah.
But Bottoms, you're like, wow, she's just a really funny person.
She's so funny, and that movie is insane. Like that movie is absolutely out of its mind.
One of my favorites in a really long time. There has to be more movies like that. I honestly wish more people saw it.
Me too. It was so funny. I was like, what is even happening in this movie?
I don't know what's happening, but I liked it.
It's funny because we were talking about how this show has probably got a pretty small budget, but maybe they spent all the budget on the music because the music in this show is so good.
That song that they play like 5 times, I really like. A guy from Pearl Jam.
I looked it up after like the 5th time that they played it.
Me too.
It's a Sooner or Later or Save It for Later by Eddie Vedder. It's like a cover of like
it's stuck in my head. Like
I had I put it on my like Spotify liked list. I'm like, all right, I'm jamming out to it now. I was like driving
yes, driving. It's a good driving song. It's a good like I'm going somewhere and I'm just gonna like be in my head. It's a good song. I like it a lot. They shouldn't have done it. They shouldn't have played it 5 times.
He played it so many times.
I feel like different like versions of it too. Like here's the instrumental. Here's it a little fast. Here's the regular song.
Yeah. It was kind of like a theme, like a thematic like cue through the whole season. But I liked when they played it like instrumentally. When they played just like the actual song like multiple times, I was like, okay, like the one time was probably great. And then the instrumental, I love that. I love that as a callback.
Yeah.
We don't need to like maybe one of the 10 times we played it, we could have like not played it. But I
made it feel like a cheap show. It made it feel like a student film where it's like we only have rights to this song.
We got this one.
We're gonna utilize it.
We have Eddie Vedder, but they play a lot of like REM, like Counting Crows. Like they play a.
They did Weezer. They did a Weezer song.
Right? They have a good soundtrack,
and they're not like besides Sabotage, because I think they did do Sabotage by Beastie Boys. They don't really play like the songs you expect because Weezer they're not playing Say It Ain't So. They're playing In the Garage. Like I know because I like the Blue Album, but like that's not a popular song from them.
Yeah, I loved it. All their needle drops, I think, have been so good. Like even like in season 1 and season 2, we were like turn to each other and be like, "What song is that?" We're like Shazamming the songs. You're like, "Oh man, this show has the best soundtrack." So like, say what you want about this season, but the soundtrack continues to reign supreme.
I agree. It's definitely my type of music. It's all old music. You're not going to get something that's like
all from like it's a very like 90s kind of coded.
Yeah.
80s, 70s,
Did
90s.
Dave Matthews Band ever play on here? I feel like they
I
they
don't
they
know.
feel like a Dave
It feels
Matthews
like
Band
it
type
feels like a
show.
Dave kind of show, doesn't it?
It's so interesting because I love I don't judge me. I like Dave Matthews. I've been only one of their concerts. I hear you can't judge someone if they've been to
I
multiple
have
concerts.
also been to Dave Matthews
Oh,
a concert.
good.
I am more neutral on Dave Matthews. I know that like I knew the one song and I kept on like going up
Crash
to
Into
the
Me?
not that one. It was
Oh.
Ants Marching. I knew that song.
The other.
And coming up to the concert, I would just walk around the house going "Burr, burr, burr," on like annoying mic. And then at the concert, they didn't play it, and I was so mad.
They didn't play Ant Smart. That's kind of crazy, actually. That's a little ridiculous. They didn't play it. But I've
Well,
only been to one concert for
well,
of
Dave
his.
fact apparently is
Mm,
that if he is ever playing 2 concerts at one venue, like
mm.
back to back, if you want the hits, you should go to the first night because apparently the
Oh,
first night is when he plays all the hits, and the second night is when he more jams out. And
that's
that's what
that
we were at
sucks.
the second night, and I was like, "Where's the ants?"
Did they at least do Crash Into Me, or
I don't even think they did.
that's really
It
bad?
was some Dave Matthews deep cuts, none of which I was familiar with, but it was a great concert.
No, it's a weird because it's like a weird vibe concert. Like I get why people say what they say because I think the crowd's a little interesting. But like I don't know, he's like just like you just gotta keep an open mind. He's what I was gonna say is that Greta Gerwig, her 90s needle drops in her movies and her content like Barbie. I remember I like the Indigo Girls. I like the Indigo Girls before Barbie. And I remember like I'd always play the song Closer Than Fine like all the time. Like I just enjoyed the song because it's just something I enjoyed. And then Phil, he was playing Closer Than Fine. He was singing it. I'm like, oh my God, like, you got into the song. Like I'm so happy. He's like, yeah, I've been singing that Barbie song. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, by what's her freaking face? The person who did the cover. She's a queer country singer. I can't think of her
Oh,
name
I
right
didn't
now.
know that that was a cover.
Yeah, so she did a cover version of it in Barbie, and he's like, I love that song. I'm like, but you're singing the cover version. You're not singing
Oh,
the
it's the Brandy Carlisle.
Brandy Carlisle. Yeah. She did it, and it's a good version. But I'm like, oh man, I like the Indigo Girls. Anyways, Greta Gerwig, if you saw Lady Bird, there's this whole sequence of Dave Matthews Band's Crash Into Me, and I just love it because it's just like it's a bad song. It's like it's actually the lyrics are very bad. It's about him. He says it's not about this, but it's just about him wanting to look under this girl's skirt. The whole song's about that. Um, that's the whole song. But there's something
Dave, you
about
dirty
it.
dog.
He really is dirty, but he said he's not. He said it's not about that. I'm like,
He's
boy,
like, that's not what it's about.
I'm pretty sure it is. But there's something about that guitar and something the way he sings it. It's just like good. Ants Marching, that song should not exist. That song's not good. But it's
How dare
something about
you?
it. But something about it is good. Look, but I'm saying like scientifically, is that a good song? No, I don't think it is. But there's something about Dave Matthews that it doesn't matter. I remember when I learned that Dave Matthews was a bad artist was I had a class, a music class, like analyzing music for college.
Mhm.
And there was a paper we had to do about live music. It was about this scholarly paper. The scholar said live music doesn't matter. And my teacher's like, you should prove why this scholar paper is wrong. And talk about like why live music matters. And I was like, oh, Dave Matthews could be interesting to talk about because he does so many shows. And
Yeah.
and then there was someone in my class who said, you did Dave Matthews Band? Like the worst band ever? I was like, yeah, I just thought it'd be interesting.
Listen, Dave can rock. How dare you?
That's when I learned that Dave Matthews, I guess, was the worst band ever. And then between me,
I disagree with
I
that.
agree.
As somebody who's not even Dave Matthews fan, I feel like I need to like defend his honor.
You're not Dave Matthews Hive.
I'm not a part of the Dave Hive, but But
I'm gonna say he's my favorite band ever. I just think he's just something interesting about him. The way he grooves, the way
it
he
was a
gloves.
good show. Everybody was
Yeah.
chill, you know. It was
Everyone was too
fun.
chill. They were a little bit too chill
Very
at the Dave
chill.
Matthews Band. Let me say that.
Very chill.
I was at an outdoor concert for that one. And they're
That's
all
good because then you
yeah.
didn't get the contact high that
Yeah,
an indoor concert would
exactly.
have given you.
I smelt it, but
It was all around.
it was all around and everyone was having a good time. But yeah, no, it's interesting. Going back to 90s needle drops, it's she does a really good job with that. And with Greta Gerwig and Bear does it too. But they
Yeah.
do it. They definitely do more like male driven songs. I don't hate, but
Yeah.
it's definitely more of like here's Weezer. And you know what?
Weezer and REM and Counting Crows
Yeah.
and stuff. I was like, "Ah, man, this is the best. I haven't heard
But
this
yeah,
song in a long time."
I don't mind it by any means. And like Weezer also gets a bad rep and they deserve it. Like Dave doesn't, but like Weezer's albums post like and everyone makes a joke, but post Pinkerton is not that great. So like I get it.
They've had some decent songs.
They have 2 good albums and then they got some scattered decent songs. But the one thing about Weezer, which I think I heard a music review about this, where it's like he's like a 50-year-old man. He still sings about the same. He always sings about like a girl he can't get, and he's been married for like 30 years. And he's just like, man, you should be singing about something else. He always sings in like the point of view of like a high school guy. And I'm like, but this doesn't make any sense coming from you now. In the Garage has nothing to do with that. You should listen to the song. If you're a Marvel fan, Kitty Pryde has a reference. Like who the hell knew Kitty Pryde would have a reference in that song? Anyways, that's our tangent about music, and we will wrap up our Bear conversation. But I like the season. This is my favorite show. I really, really like it. I don't watch that much television, so it's a show that I actually look forward to watching. And I like the story. I like the vibe of it. It's cool.
Yeah, I think it's a really good show. I would still recommend it to people. I think that this season was a little slower than I wanted it to be, but I didn't think it was bad. I know some people are like, a little down on this season. Don't listen to those people and just watch it anyway. I think it was good.
Yeah.
I liked it. I liked it.
You could watch this in
it's
one
so
sitting
quick.
if you want.
I got it done in like a week, maybe not even a week, less than a week. And I wasn't even watching like more than 2 a day probably, and it's quick.
It's so. I watched the last 3 episodes last night because I was like, "Oh damn, I gotta like watch these episodes." And they're even
I watched
a little
the
longer.
last 2 last night. Yeah,
I was like, I gotta get that done. But yeah, that's our Bear conversation. We'll keep you guys updated what is coming next. Our schedules are crazy, but we're trying to keep consistent. So I think we'll see. But it looks like Morgan and Amy's gonna be doing a duo next week. It was actually supposed to be this week. But the Bear came out, and we're like, well, we should probably.
Came out, and we were like, we got to hop on that. Amy and I are still going to do our Patreon exclusive about the rest of the season of Bridgerton. So if you Bridgerton Hive, rise up. But if you enjoyed our season 3. Not pilot pod because it wasn't the pilot that would have been helpful for Kat. Our season 3 premiere episode, but wanted to know what we thought about the rest of the season. We're going to be covering that on the Patreon. So if you're not a Patreon supporter, you should go over there, patreon.com/The Legendary Ladies Podcast, and become one. We have several levels of which we've updated recently. So if you that now seems like a great time to hop on board the Patreon.
Yeah, definitely go check it out. Morgan, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Mojotastic. You can also find me as a co-host on Supergirl Radio, where we're currently covering my adventures with Superman. Although Rebecca is abroad. She is traveling. She's seeing the world. She's staying in a castle in Ireland. So we pre-recorded some episodes, so there'll still be new Supergirl radios while she's out and about. But we are going to be a couple weeks behind on my adventures with Superman. But if you've been watching that show on Max and you want to know our opinions on it, that is where you can find it. Kat, what Kickstarter do you maybe have going on right now?
Right now, we're doing Slice of Life, which is our webtoon. It's about an anime character comes to life, falls in love with a high school cheerleader. This is our coming out issue. So if you enjoy stories like that, It is our character finally accepting her sexuality. So go check that one out. And next week, we're going to have a Kickstarter for Beast and Snow issue 2, which Morgan actually helped us with a little bit. So we have a special thank you for Morgan and Amy.
Oh, I'm dying to see where that landed because we were in a brainstorming call with you guys. So I'm interested to see where the story ended up.
I think you'll like it. There's definitely a lot of ideas that you guys had, and it was really fun to brainstorm. So
that was actually a very fun call.
Yeah, I hope we get to do it again. It'd be fun to do that. So go check that out. Beast and Snow. It's about a vampire Snow White and a werewolf Belle from Beauty and the Beast, and they fall in love. This is more of our werewolf centric issue. So go check it out. That will be live July 8th, I want to say, is Monday. It's so hard when you record this and you're like, I don't know when this is released, but it's going to be the Monday of July 8th, I believe. So, but it's definitely that Monday. I just don't know the date. So go check that out, and hopefully you guys enjoyed and stay legendary.